Hi everybody and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I am making apple spice muffins. I'm going to start out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And don't worry metric people, because all the metric equivalents are going to be in my description box down below with the recipe, okay? 2 cups of Canadian all-purpose flour. That's strong flour or bread flour in the UK or in the United States, because our flour is different. Next ingredient is my baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder. And I'm going to put 3½ teaspoons in here. Now that's 3 full teaspoons have just gone in. And now I'll switch over to a 1/2 teaspoon measuring spoon and put in a 1/2 teaspoon. There you go. This is an older recipe and that's why they're saying 3½ teaspoons. Today mostly you'd get even numbers of teaspoons in here, and they want 3/4 teaspoon of salt, which is very unusual too, because nowadays you would get, a teaspoon of salt or 1/2 teaspoon of salt or whatever, you would get 3/4. So I'm going to be doing some math here. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I have a 1/2 teaspoon measure here. So I want to put in a 1/2 teaspoon, as if you remember your fractions from school. 1/2 teaspoon is 2/4, and 1/4 teaspoon, so 2/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. Next I'm going to be adding a teaspoon of cinnamon. I like to round these up when I'm doing this, because back in the days when these cookbooks were written, they were a little bit thrifty about using their spices. So nowadays we like to be a bit more full flavored. And 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, which I may be a bit more generous with too, because nutmeg is a really nice flavor. Back when these cookbooks were written, it was quite an expensive spice, so I think I'll be adding more like a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg here. Housewives in those days, or homemakers in those days, homemakers back in the 50s and 60s had to be quite thrifty with using their ingredients, especially their spices. They were still coming out of World War II, and their mindset was, this stuff is really hard to find, it's expensive, and we have to be very careful using it. Cookbooks reflected that back in the day. Now I'm just going to combine all these ingredients in my bowl here. It says blend or sift together, so I'm just going to blend these together. And you want to make sure that this, when you're finished stirring, that this mixture looks quite homogeneous. So you don't have, that just means you don't want to have pockets of salt or sugar or spices here. You want it all to be blended together. There we go, that looks all kind of blended together. I don't know if you can see any difference here, but anyway. Now I'm just going to put this to a side. I'm going to put that to one side for now, because now I need 3/4 cup, this is a 3/4 cup measure, of finely chopped apple. And I'm going to peel. They have to be peeled and diced, so I don't know how many apples that is, but I will let you know how many it took me. I know I have peelers and slicers and all kinds of fancy gear, but nothing beats a good old-fashioned paring knife sometimes when you're doing these things. I know there's special apple core remover gizmos that you can use, but I'm only going to be doing a couple of apples, so I'm just going to do this with my paring knife. Okay, this is the one medium-sized apple that I just used to make up this 3/4 cup of finely chopped apple. So I'm just going to stir in my 3/4 cup of apple. Every last bit of it. So I'm just going to stir that into my flour mixture. If you happen to use a bigger apple and you end up with a little more apple, don't worry about it. You'll just have a little more apple in your muffins, that's all. Okay, now put that aside again. And now I have to do 1 well-beaten egg. I'm just going to put this in a bowl, like so. 1 grade A large egg. This recipe calls for 1 well-beaten egg, okay? And if you want to put that in your stand mixer and mix it up in your stand mixer, go for it. If you have a handheld mixer, go for it. If you have a whisk, go for it. Me, I like to use a fork out of the drawer. So I'm just going to beat this in a bowl like this. It's a little bit of wrist action. You can use an old-fashioned handheld egg beater if you've got one. I'm not making angel food cake here, something that requires a lot of eggs and a lot of beating and so on. This is just something you can do easily with the fork. There you go, 1 beaten egg. Now it says to combine together this 1 beaten egg, 1/4 cup of oil, liquid oil, or melted shortening. Nowadays you would probably just use olive oil, canola oil, mazola oil, 1 cup of milk. Yeah, I may have used too small a bowl for this. Let's see how it goes. I may have made a little bit. I picked too small a bowl to do this in. See what I can do here. There we go. All right, I'm just going to stir these together. Bring my big bowl back over, and I'm going to make a well. And then which means just kind of make a little depression in the middle of your mixture, middle of your dry ingredients. And now I'm going to pour these combined ingredients in here in the middle, like that. Just dump. In they go, 1 big dump. I admit I should use a bigger bowl. I'm just going to clean the rest of my mixture out of here. Oh yes, and I should be preheating my oven to 400 degrees, so I'll just start that right now. I'm just going to stir this up and to make a lumpy batter. And of course it's going to be lumpy because you're going to have all those chunks of apple in here. But just stir it till it's combined. It doesn't take very long. Got a nice wet, moist batter here. Down the side of my bowl. And there we go. There's my batter. It's quite wet. That's okay. It's going to make great muffins. And you notice today I used my spatula, my wooden spoon, and a fork out of the drawer. That's all the fancy tools I used today, and a paring knife, to create these muffins. You don't need a lot of specialty equipment to bake. And now I'm here with my muffins, my muffin pan all prepared with muffin cup liners. I'm kind of using Christmas ones even though it's only September, but you know what? It's what I got in the house. I'm out of plain ones, so I'm just going to use what I've got, which I seem to have a lot of Christmas or winter oriented ones, so I'm going to use those. This is the only piece of specialty equipment I'm going to use today. This is a cookie scoop. A large size one holds about 3 tablespoons, I think it is. And each one of these will make a nice sized muffin. When these are finished, they won't be as big as a muffin that you would buy at a coffee shop, but they won't cost you $2 each either. So, when you make these at home, and I hope that you will, you can have 2. Instead of buying one giant muffin at the takeout window, at the coffee shop in your neighborhood, or the takeout window, the drive-through, you can spend a half an hour making these at home. Have lovely muffins for a fraction of that price, and you'll have a whole dozen of them. Just going to scrape up my bowl. Make sure I've got enough to fill up this last one. Because this recipe for some reason says it makes 10 medium-sized muffins, but it does make 12. You just have to make sure you scrape out your bowl. I'm just going to use up the rest of this and distribute it among my muffin tins, my muffin pans, and my muffins here. So a little bit of extra batter in each one. Alrighty, here's my cleaned out bowl. And just as soon as my oven comes up to be preheated at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe that's 205 degrees Celsius, I will be putting these in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes, and I'll be back to show you what my fresh, hot apple spice muffins look like when they're fresh out of the oven. Hi everyone, here I am with my apple spice muffins fresh and hot out of the oven. And I'm just going to use a knife here to circle each one and make sure that they are loose, so that when I turn my muffin pan open, all my muffins will fall out. Alright, here I am Ready to dump my muffins out. Here we go. Oh, mix it up. All right, these smell delicious and divine. You can smell that cinnamon and nutmeg and the apple. I'm gonna take some pictures of these after they have a chance to cool down for 10 minutes, and I'll be turning them out and giving them a try. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video today, and I hope that you will like, subscribe, tell your friends, and make a comment. Try this recipe at home. I hope you will. And come on back and see me next time on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.